Wlea remembers the flood of '72. From the Hornell Evening Tribune, June 22nd, 1972. Scores of area roads were closed and bridges washed out as rain continued to pelt Steuben and Allegheny counties this morning, following the torrential downpour that brought about yesterday's high water. Hundreds of people have been forced to flee their homes for the sanctuary of area schools. From the New York Times, June 23, 1972. The most severe flooding occurred in the southern tier, where thousands were evacuated from Hornell, Wellsville, and Olean. In Hornell, WLEA's Kevin Dorn broadcast for 3 days straight. During that 72-hour period, Kevin, the station staff, and some volunteers worked, ate, and in some cases, crashed on studio couches when they could get a nap in. Kevin was a known Hornell radio personality who'd been on WLEA since the mid-1950s.
For those of you who don't know exactly what happened, let me simply say that there was no warning issued, but about 4 o'clock this morning, reports came in of flooding and dangerous situations throughout the area. The first reports were received at City Hall, and the firemen and policemen have been on duty ever since. All firemen, all policemen are now on duty. Telephone company reports that due to the emergency situation created by the storm, the calling load of the telephone system has reached a record high. Please use your telephone for important calls only. You will be helping local officials and those people who must make local calls.
This Hornell woman called to the radio station.
I'm going to put you on the air, man. Don't be afraid. Go ahead. Now, what did you say?
I just talked with my mother at Green Acres Trailer Court, and she said they don't know where to evacuate. They can't get down Seneca Road or over Pennsylvania Hill Road.
Because of water?
Yeah.
All right. Now, the other side of that statement was this. 324-1451. Don Eisman will provide boats. Is that what you're talking about? They need boats?
Well, she said they aren't ready to leave yet. They're staying there, but if they do have to get out, they're wondering where to go.
Well, I'd just get where it's safe. That's all I can say to you right now. I can tell you, I'm certain the senior high school in Hornell would be glad to take you. They have American Red Cross people there right now.
Well, we called and asked her to come to Hornell to our house, and she said they can't get down through Seneca Road, so they can't come, where we are.
Right. I would say this to you. Who is your local police official?
Oh, we live here in Hornell.
No. Well, why don't you call the sheriff's department, pass the information along that you've just given me, then call us back and we'll make it clear to everybody.
All right.
Thank you very much.
One of the people listening to the radio during the flood was Hornell resident Vince Kelly.
When the flood was going on, the radio station was saying that they could use some help down at the fire station. So I went down there, and at that time, Hornell was the center, the emergency operations center for the flood. Sheriff Lacey and everybody else was using the Hornell radio room in the Hornell Fire Department as their operations center. And then as things got worse down in the Corning area, they moved the operation down closer to Corning. So Hornell was actually the beginning of the emergency operations center for the flood of '72.
Vince Kelly was later to become the fire chief in Hornell. Hornell Mayor Andy Mazzella was often on the phone with WLEA during the flood. At one point on June 23rd, Mazzella spoke of his concerns of young children playing near the river.
We were urging to keep the children home today.
Yeah, we had a scare this morning with a 9-year-old boy, and cruising the city, there are an awful lot of children out playing in the water and playing near the bridges. I just saw a little child down on the arterial bridge, and he's fooling around that bridge, and I said to Captain Coogan and Chief Rose that if someone doesn't, take the fun out of this thing for the kids and keep them safe, I'm afraid we're going to lose one or two, because while the situation is improving, there's still a dangerous situation, especially around these bridges.
One of the kids who was playing near the river was a young Frank Brzezowski.
So I could remember the creeks rising and wondering whether the water was going to come over the walls. And we used to go up there and watch, and of course we'd get yelled at because we were near the river. And just about all the neighborhood houses around in our neighborhood, the basements were already filled with water, and everybody was kind of confined to their little area, watching and wondering what was going to happen next.
Frank Brzezowski later joined the Hornell Fire Department and became fire chief in 2019. Numerous homes were destroyed, and people were frequently evacuated from their houses.
I understand that Dennis Avenue and Hart Street evacuated. Is that correct?
The people of Dennis Avenue, Hart Street, Swan Street, the people that were in immediate danger and wanted to leave their homes were evacuated. There's some people that have not indicated a willingness to leave and are still there. We have plenty of firemen and policemen out. If the need arises, we will be able to evacuate them. But
and also some elderly in other parts of the community.
Scattered elderly, where they were a little frightened and upset and alone, have been evacuated.
An evacuation as far as Mira-Mosella is concerned in Hornell, and I presume this would apply to other areas, is simply this. You are warned that you are in danger, and you are advised to leave. Well, presumably they would force you to leave if they were certain that your danger was immediate. Many people have decided to stay. The mayor has said, and other officials we've spoken with this morning have said, please don't stay if there is any question in your mind. So the simple rule of thumb would be, if you have any doubts at all as to your safety, get out. Don't stay behind to save a chair. Muriel?
The Ronald Mosier family from Dennis Avenue have been evacuated and are safe. This is for the benefit of their relatives who would be worried. And a call from Arkport said the big boat from Geneseo just went through Arkport.
Repeat both of those.
All right. The Ronald Mosier family from the lower end of Dennis Avenue have been evacuated and are safe. This is for the benefit of their grandmother, particularly, who lives up on North Main, who would be worried. And a big boat from Geneseo just went on its way to rescue operations in this area, just went through Arkport.
That means we got two, one from Hammondsport and one from Geneseo. Thank you, Muriel, very much. Here's Jan Travis. Jan, do you have anything for us?
Well, I was just up to the high school at the Red Cross, and so far they've got something like 30 people there, and they got people from Dennis Avenue, River Street, and one of the Red Cross representatives says Crosby Street looks pretty bad. She was down around that area, and they also got people from James and Jane. Riding around, I noticed that the Fulton Street North Church Street intersection is impassable, along with, very much so, the William Street North Church Street intersection. So it'd be advisable to not travel anyway, but if you must go, please avoid those areas.
Thank you very much, Jan.
There was talk of possibly evacuating the Hornell nursing home.
Here's Dick Gold at City Hall.
Okay, they've canceled an evacuation order at the Hornell nursing home.
All right, now you say they canceled it, so apparently we're going to do it.
They were going to. They were over there. The police told me that they were getting set to get them out, and apparently they are in no danger over there, so they're leaving them where they are.
Work on sandbagging was done by many. One of those helping was Channel 6 TV owner Jack Pryor.
Big Creek was getting pretty high and starting to overflow the banks, especially those houses on the north end of Cleveland Avenue were getting in deep problem. I remember having people calling and saying, can you help? And so my wife and I went down and we loaded up sandbags first down by the fire station, filled sandbags, and then people with pickup trucks would take them down to the corner of Cleveland Avenue and Rural Avenue in that general area. And we piled them up on the banks to try and keep Big Creek from overflowing and coming down there. I know a lot of people got water in their cellars. We got water in our cellar, too, on Elmwood.
DOT worker Steve Case remembers well the flooding in North Hornell.
Well, it was about 3 in the morning when I got a call to go out on Big Creek Road, and I saw that the Big Creek was up and over the bank. It ran down towards the end of Cleveland Avenue and then cut across people's lawns, yards, and went out Rural Avenue out that way. And it took a lot of the riverbank out from the country club going west, which had to be sandbagged and repaired later. And that was all done by volunteers from North Hornell, Arkport. People showed up to help sandbag.
Cars are underwater at FAD Motors. That'd be on the Big Creek Road, and we have been advised not to use the Big Creek Road, or you've been advised, rather. It's flooding and washing out in several places. Route 21, flooded between Hornell and Wayland.
Reports frequently came in to WLEA from station staff members.
I was talking with...
This is Harold McAvoy. Come on, Mac.
I was talking with Trooper Gary Forshee in Canasteel just a minute ago. He's manning the police department down there because he can't get home. Now, there's water going over the East Main Street Bridge in Canasteel now. And those two places in the dike that were bad are getting worse. It's beginning to eat away the dike. It's a question of time now. But that's down near the bridge. And in the Purdy Creek area, the situation is bad. Very bad. In fact, there's 3 people in trouble down there, and 1 or 2 of them are inland. And there's 2 rescue squads going in. And that's the latest we have so far from Canasteel.
Okay, so it is being taken care of. That's important.
This Canasteel resident recalled seeing how high the water got there.
I remember coming back from work, around 5 in the evening, maybe 5:30. And I think I had a 65 Mustang at the time. And coming back into town, as I passed over the dike, either before going over the dike or right after going after the dike, I was running in the water that the water was coming in my doors. It was pretty deep right there. And I think it wasn't too long after that the village was kind of shut down as far as people being able to get out of town.
Canasteel resident John Babbitt.
Well, the dikes were up to within a foot of the top, and they pretty much remained that. There was one place over by the bus garage area that had worn away, found a weak spot, but it was quickly patched. So the dikes pretty much saved the community from a lot of damage. Most of the people in town only had water damage in their cellars.
At one point, word came in from the State Board of Regents that there would be no region exams or final exams because of the flooding.
Now we got some reports for you.
This is from Harold Paul, Superintendent of Schools. A ruling has been obtained from the Board of Regents on the exams that were being given today, Regents exams, and their ruling is that inasmuch as they cannot be given because of the emergency situation, in order that students will not be penalized, final grades will be determined as average grades based on the year's work for Regents credit.
John Babbitt was a teacher at Canasteel at that time.
What they did is they took the students' average for the 4 marking periods, and if it was passing, they were passed. Of course, there was only exams to be given. The school year was over for most of the kids.
Calls came into the radio station from Hornell and surrounding towns.
I'm going to put you on the air.
I'm calling from Canasteel, and we live on Taylor Street, and this water's almost to our house here where it joins Russell nearly. But we have a son with a family in Wellsville that live at 43 South Broad, and I'd be interested in knowing how that water situation is there. And where that locale is. We have many friends there, and many people from our area work and live in that area.
But here's a report now just in from Wellsville, and check that where, Gary. Heavy rain triggered in part by the remains of Tropical Storm Agnes has caused widespread flooding in southwestern New York State. The flooding has forced dozens of families in the region to evacuate their homes. The rain began last night. It sent the Genesee River, the Canacadea, Bennett, and Purdy Creek spilling over their banks and into low-lying areas of Wellsville, Hornell, Scioto, Belmont, Friendship, and numerous other smaller communities. And that would include, of course, Canasteel and Alma.
15 feet of water in Wellsville, 80 patients removed from the nursing home, not because an emergency existed, but in the event. Bolivar, there's 4 feet of water in the main street, and in addition to that, they got a broken water main.
That's all in Wellsville. All right, you're and Bolivar. Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you for a very good job.
In Wellsville, the flooding there was significant. Wellsville resident Tom Rooning.
The hospital changed. We lost buildings along the river that had been there for years, for a good 50, 100 years. And then the village fathers decided to get with New York State, and they put the 4-lane in, which took traffic off Main Street. So the river looks a little different than it did back then. It was much, it was tree-shaded, I guess you could say. And now it isn't because you got the dikes up there. And it just changed the way people lived here. People had to move to different places in town. Their houses were gone.
One person who used to call in from Arkport was a minister there.
This is John from Oswald, and the situation is this, that
There is danger of the bridge on East Avenue going out. It's in a very shaky position right now and may go out at any time. There are many homes in the Meadowbrook and Northridge area that have flooded basements of 2, 3, 4 feet of water and much furniture being moved out. People are sandbagging around their homes, but we're out of sandbags up here. The creek is coming down at quite a rapid rate and bringing a lot of debris, and also been asked to announce that there is no danger to the Arkport water supply at this point.
From the New York Times, June 24th, 1972. In Almond, residents were evacuated while waiting for an earthen road construction embankment to give way. One person living in that area at the time was an Alfred Almond schoolteacher, Bob Codispoti.
The water level behind our house was just unbelievably high. My understanding was that up above our home, something must have happened to the creek. Must have got plugged up, whether it was stones, gravel, whatever. But it overshot the creek bed and came right down through the middle of our house. I believe it was also going down the road, down Main Street Road.
Sadly, the first victims weren't an Almond man and his 6-year-old daughter who drowned while trying to escape their home.
There have been 2 deaths in Almond, a father and a daughter.
And we're going to withhold any further information on that now for the time being.
Hornell Mayor Andy Mazzella recounts how he went up to the Almond Dam to take a look at it.
The Almond Dam, that was during the construction pipes, 2 giant sluice pipes that were emptying into the dam, and that during the construction project, they failed. They collapsed, and with all the dirt that was around it, and that actually formed a dam that prevented more water from getting into the Almond Dam. Oh, Eddie O'Hara and those guys didn't think that the dam would collapse, but it could possibly have been in danger of overflowing if that secondary dam that collapsed didn't form a secondary dam.
On Sunday, June 25th, there was another tragedy. While the Army Corps of Engineers helicopters were flying over the area, surveying the damage, there was a fatal helicopter accident on Crosby Creek in Hornell. Hornell resident John White was there.
My brother Ernie and I and Billy and Danny Ravel were walking down the street, Crosby Street, from our house where we lived to the Ravel's house, and a helicopter came flying overhead really low. I was, I guess, in the summer of 72, 9 years old, and we saw the helicopter hit the power line, and it stopped and just came immediately crashing down to the ground in the creek. And we started to run over that way, and John Salinas, who lived right on the corner there, yelled to us and told us to get away from there. So we immediately ran home and told my mother, you know, this helicopter had crashed. So then later we went over on the creek bank and watched as the Hornell Fire Department and all the rescue people came. And today, almost 50 years later, every time I see the helicopter go overhead, a Mercy flight or anything, I think of that day watching that helicopter crash.
The 3 men who were on board the helicopter were killed. One of them was a Prattsburg native. The others were from Whitney Point and Glen Aubrey. One of the radio station employees was a young Gary Acker, who was working at Wlea in high school. Acker was often on the air during the flood.
Well, heavy rain, triggered in part by the remains of Tropical Storm Agnes, has caused widespread flooding in southwestern New York. As you already know, this story released from the Associated Press. The flooding has forced zones of families in the region to evacuate their home. The rain, which began last night, sent the Genesee River and Kanakadea, Bennett's, and Purdy Creek spilling over their banks and into low-lying areas of Wellsville, Hornell, Scioto, Belmont, Friendship, and numerous other smaller communities.
As the weather was improving in Hornell and water levels were going down, there was a point where it was a possibility that Hurricane Agnes would return as Vince Kelly recalls.
As things started to settle down a little bit, there was some news stories about Hurricane Agnes got up into Canada and turned around and is headed back towards New York State. But it fizzled out before it came back across the border.
One problem the Hornell area faced from the flood was a lack of drinking water. Andy Mazzella noted how Hornell businessman Sam Leland was a great help to the community by providing a huge amount of drinking water.
After the flood was subsiding and we're having problems with water, that he opened up the plant and allowed anybody and everybody to come and get all the water they needed, because he had the facilities that were where he was able to process water and purify it. And he kept the city in water for a couple of days, 2 or 3 days, of people that really needed it. So that was a very generous act on his part, and that is something that really helped the community as they worked their way back from it.
But as the weather was improving in Hornell, it was getting worse in Corning. Andy Mazzella remembers how a lot of Hornell residents were only too quick to help Corning out.
I remember the generosity of the people, because although we had our own problems, Corning was really devastated, and they had a lot of needs. They needed equipment, they needed generators, they needed a lot of stuff that they could work with, plus food. So the people in our community responded, and truckload after truckload of equipment and household needs and food went from Hornell to Corning and helped the people in Corning out. And it was a tremendous response of kindness and generosity and concern.
Hornell fireman Jim Mellenbacher was one of the firemen who went to Corning for 48 hours.
When we sent a carload after we got ours done into Corning and stayed 2 days to help them down there.
As a result of the flood of 72, government officials built the Chesapeake Bay Susquehanna River Basin Project to prevent another such disaster from ever happening again. Thank you for listening as WLEA remembers the flood of 1972. We close with Kevin Dorn, of whom Bob Lonsberry said later that during the flood, he was a literal voice in the dark for marooned families clustered around transistor radios.
A state of emergency has been declared in Allegheny County, and most county roads are reported closed there. Newsman reports some power lines down, and several small bridges have been washed away. 30 people were reported now at the high school. They are being taken care of. You just heard that report. Now, the situation briefly seems to be this. Hornell, the situation seems to be under control. But Mayor Mazzella says we must find that fine line between panic, which we don't need at all, of course, and complacency. Obviously, the thing to have is caution. There is no need to be alarmed, the mayor says. However, if you do wish to be evacuated from your home, there is plenty of help. And I can testify to that because I've seen plenty of help available with our fine policemen and firemen standing by right now, ready to help you in any way if you need any kind of help at all. You can call them. I want to thank all of you people. Some of you are standing around here. You're doing a marvelous job. Thank you.